And welcome to the Cedar Falls Committee of the Whole meeting this March 18th, 2019. I now call this meeting to order. Two items up for this evening's agenda. First is the pavement management presentation and bills and payroll. And I'd like to call up one of our engineers, Chase Schrage, for a presentation to get started for our pavement management.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I guess it's that time of year again where we'd like to talk to you about our pavement management program. And tonight I will cover a few different things. The first being a general overview of our program that we have in place, and then go more into specific detail on the 2020 streets. And then Matt Tolan with our engineering department will follow up with a summary of 2021 through 23. I just wanted to remind you that this program, a majority of it is funded by the local option sales tax, and a majority of those funds go into the specific street repairs, and all the staff and oversight hours is paid for out of the general fund. So when we talk about the pavement management program, there's two major things that we'd like to discuss, and that's the reconstruction and the restoration. The reconstruction is the full depth repair. That can be concrete or asphalt, and that's generally where we completely remove the street, replace all the underground facilities, whether it's storm, sanitary, water. And then the restoration is basically just a maintenance, whether it's an asphalt overlay or a seal coat to try to extend the pavement life. This slide may be familiar to you from last year. We did discuss the 2019 streets in late August. And we talked about kind of our process of selection and the evaluation, where in the fall of each year, we have a staff member from engineering. They drive all of the city streets. We prioritize them. We give them what's called a pavement condition index rating. We're looking at all the different types of surface defects, cracking, joint separation, those types of things. And they vary from whether it's a concrete or asphalt street. So that is a visual inspection that we do. We've done it that way since the option tax was in place since '91, so we have done that visual inspection since then. Just some general information for you. Like I said, the option tax has been in place since '91. We're going on almost 30 years now of having it in place. Just to give you an idea of mileage in the street, I guess Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have around 225 miles of city streets that we own, operate, and maintain. So since the option tax has been in place, we've covered about 150 miles of that. Complete streets, I know there was a presentation last year giving you some more in-depth detail about the policy and what we look at for when we're reconstructing a street. With that, I just wanted to touch on a few things, and obviously complete streets is trying to accommodate all users, whether they're cyclists or transit users, emergency vehicles. It even goes into the connectivity in the neighborhoods with sidewalk infills and whether it's business districts or institutional. We do have safe routes to schools that we look at and try to incorporate any infill locations that may improve the neighborhood. With that, we look at the bike plan. These maps are hard to see here, but when we're going into full reconstruction, we look at any accommodations we can do for the cyclists, as well as any of the streetscape elements that we can incorporate in the downtown area, and try to do that while we're doing a full reconstruction. So there are some accommodations we can do during restoration or maintenance, but they're pretty minor, being that we can't, we're not changing the street width or any of that. So. There's just a map of kind of give you a general geographic of Cedar Falls and what's happening in 2019 and 2020. You know, we try to spread out the streets and make sure we have adequate traffic flow and nothing conflicts with each other during these projects. So. (2020) reconstruction streets. These are ones I will go into a little more detail on the next slides here, but The one I wanted to mention up front here is 3rd Street. That one will be included with our downtown streetscape project. We will do the full depth reconstruction at that time, and it will not be part of our pavement management project that we have, but it'll be under a different project, so. Starting with Lilac Lane. The street's in very poor condition. It's 31 feet wide. It's parking on both sides in this section. It's actually a continuation of what we're doing this year in 2019. We have some significant infrastructure problems under the street, sanitary sewer issues with I&I. That's being replaced, water mains being replaced, and obviously the storm sewer. So in this location, there's no adjacent sidewalks along this corridor, and there's none on the neighboring properties, but we do look to try to connect those when we can, and I know in a future year, we'll be looking at McLean to try to get a connection up to University at some point. I just wanted to say that if there are any questions throughout any of these slides, feel free to ask right away in case you may forget it later on, so I'd be happy to address those at any time.
Chase, so you said there's no sidewalk currently,
There's no sidewalk currently.
and we're not planning on adding it during this
Correct, and
project?
adjacent, 6-8 blocks either way, all the way to whether it's Boulder or Round, that would be the eastern limit there. There's no sidewalk on either end. So even if the sidewalk infill would be at a much larger scale than just this corridor right here. You'd be going 3,000 feet to a mile to get it to connect to something, so.
Does it make more sense to do it? I mean, I know it's not connected, but does it make more sense to do it now since we're already going to be there rather than have to come back?
Not necessarily. Like I said, McLean is coming up in a future year, and we are reconstructing McLean from University down to Orchard, and that would connect all of these adjacent side streets like Lilac, and it would provide access for those users to get up to University or down to Orchard. So it'd be more of a thoroughfare than what Lilac would be.
Okay, thank you.
That is just a current condition picture of Lilac. The last time we did any maintenance was 1996, and as you can see, the surface is starting to see some wear on it. So, West 12th Street, some of you may recall in approximately 2016 or 2017, we came forward with this reconstruction of this section. We were encouraged to look more in depth at the intersection of Walnut and 12th Street. There is kind of a sight distance issue when you look north on Walnut, and we wanted to make sure that we can provide any corrections that we can. And at this time that we kind of have a preliminary design for that, and that will be lowering that hill approximately 20 inches, and that will provide adequate sight distance and stopping distance for the traffic on Walnut, and it will meet all of the acceptable design standards. So we look forward to getting started on that project. This is a section that has sidewalk on both sides, so we won't be doing anything with those. It will have a continuation of shared lane markings, similar to the other portions of the corridor that we've done going west towards the school. So
Part of that was done last year, wasn't it, Chase? Part of that roadway, isn't it done from like College?
yeah, from College Street west to almost to Hudson Road. It was done last year. Yep.
Chase, this is 31 feet already?
This street is 35 feet wide, parking on the south side. And if you recall, there's been multiple discussions on shared lane markings and on-street accommodations, and that's what was the safest route, was on-street accommodations rather than a dedicated bike lane. Just another picture of the street. This one was, last maintenance was in '98, so starting to see kind of a trend that, a lot of the streets that were overlaid in the early parts of the option tax in the early '90s or even late '90s, we're starting to see those now come around into full reconstructions. So, Washington Street from 6th to 8th. There's been a lot of coordination with the St. Pat's School and the bus drop-off zone and things like that. We like to get that underway at least a year in advance, see what accommodations we can do to make the process easier for those businesses or residents along the corridor. I know we will be looking at the intersection of 7th Street, a lot of children crossing that location, and it may be a spot that we could utilize a bump out and shorten that crossing distance and make it a little safer for the users. So the street is 35 feet wide. Parking is on the west side, and it's a one-way street from 6th Street all the way south through town. The only part that's a two-way is from 1st to 6th.
How many other one-way streets do we have in this town anymore?
I'm going to rely on Brian for that one right now. I
there quite a
couldn't
few?
tell you off the top of my head.
And I don't know exactly. I do know Washington Street is a one-way. We do have a portion of Searly Boulevard that's a one-way street. I'm not coming up with too many more besides that.
Has there ever been any, I know that State was one-way for a long time. It's been pretty successfully moved to 2 lanes, and has there been any discussion about doing the same with Washington, or is that a sacred cow that we don't want to mess with?
I don't think there's been any discussion at this time. I know.
Is there an
wanna
advantage one over the other from your mind?
No, I think the state change and the Washington change were made at similar times in the late 2000s, if I recall. And continuing south on Washington, I know there hasn't been any discussion on changing that back to two-way.
But with the reconstruction, that could be accommodated if that's something that council would like to discuss.
So is there a discussion with the public along that thoroughfare to ask, or is the street wide enough, accommodating turns or drop-off zones? I know actually Hawthorne is one way by Cedar Heights Elementary,
Yeah.
and that's for school drop-off or pickup.
Yeah, it could be definitely something that we take a look at, and obviously we'd just be looking at the section from 6th to 8th, unless you want to have it be a larger range, whether it's to 12th or wherever it may be.
Is Washington, reconstruction of Washington further south in the plans?
No.
No? I'm just more curious than anything, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, there's just a picture there. As you can see on the right-hand side of the photo, there's curb missing in various locations. That is kind of the bus drop-off zone right there with the sidewalk right behind the back of curb, so.
Will there be anything, last weekend, that intersection was a mess with ice and water.
Which
standing
intersection,
water.
6th Street or
Yeah,
7th?
6th, I think. No, 8th. Right by the church. It was, I mean,
Yeah,
I know
I
it
mean-
was all the ice and stuff, but there's not anything in the reconstruction that will improve that.
We'll improve the drainage the best we can, and then where we tie in at the ends, it's difficult sometimes to get it to drain one way. But I know Washington Street is one that's extremely flat, and with an asphalt overlay that's 20 to 25 years old, it doesn't tend to go anywhere when we get rainfall events.
So this might improve it.
Yes, definitely, yep.
Okay, good.
Idaho, this is kind of just off a university there from Dallas to Boulder. This is another one that we've had some stakeholder conversations with property owners and obviously the dairy business there. And generally during those conversations, we talk about staging and timing of the project and try to provide the least amount of impact to the property for the shortest period of time. So those discussions have started. This street is 31 feet wide and it has parking on the south side. There is some sidewalk along this corridor in the northeast corner there. There's just a picture of it. Some of you may see this when you see an asphalt street that looks like more of a gray color. That's oxidation of the oil in the asphalt. Actually, when you start seeing this, the asphalt becomes very brittle and it'll start to deteriorate at a faster rate. So that's just due to the exposure to sun and elements. So. Madison Street, this is one of the streets that you've seen on the reconstruction list that will be asphalt. All the rest that I just discussed will be concrete. This one will be asphalt. This is also 31 feet wide with parking on the south side, I believe. This corridor does not have sidewalk on either side, and this is one that we would not recommend infilling at this time. There are many alternate routes along Waterloo Road near Royal. Valley Park has sidewalk that goes north to the intersection of Waterloo Road, so there is alternative routes that are nearby. Just another photo of the pavement.
Chase, I have a question.
Sure.
Going back to that one where you had the cutout in the street, a couple slides back,
On Idaho?
Idaho.
Yep.
Idaho. So this is a total reconstruction, sewer and water and everything is reconstructed, and you're going to the curb stops of all the owners there along the way?
For water, you're talking? You go to the
Correct.
curb stops for water replacement?
Yes.
If water main is replaced, generally, we provide a list to Cedar Falls Utilities of the streets that will be doing full-depth reconstruction. And sometimes they have water main that's only 20 years old and won't need to be replaced. If it's 50, 70, 80 years old, then generally they tend to replace them, and yes, they go to the curb stops when they do the replacement.
That way we don't end up with another square cut in a nice new street if something goes wrong. I was just curious. I had that happen to me right after a reconstruction.
Yep. And this is just a list of the restoration streets that we have planned. A lot of them are asphalt overlays. They may be milling off the existing surface and then overlaying it with a new surface of asphalt. So if there's any questions on a specific street, but one of those that I can point out is Cadillac Drive. That was done on the first year of option tax, a full-depth concrete street reconstructed, and that would be one of the first ones that we're going to have to overlay since our program first started.
On Chateau Court, I believe there's some drainage possibly. There's a lot of water sitting from what I recall. Are we looking at adding drains along the, they call it the?
Yeah, anytime we can improve drainage, we try to do that. It's difficult with restoration or maintenance type projects. We can install subdrain. Chateau Court is one of those ones that'll need some panel replacement prior to overlaying it, and that's what I think is causing some of the drainage issues.
And then throughout this whole program, we check for fire hydrant placements, add when we need to improve.
The fire hydrant review, I don't think's been part of our review that we do. That would be CFU. They kind of are in charge of the water main. We don't have any facility design in water main. We rely on Cedar Falls Utilities for that.
Chase, if I may, I didn't see Melrose on here. You familiar with Melrose?
This current year, 2019.
It is, okay.
Yep.
Yep, I thought it was discussed a while back. But
Yep. So that's actually, I think the contractor plans to begin next week. So.
Any further questions for Chase on this initial?
When are you going to start the program, like on Idaho streets, one street I'm interested in? When will you start reconstructing that street?
Idaho itself, I mean, that's
Yeah.
planned for 2020. That specific street, I don't feel would take the entire construction season. It may be 10 to 12 weeks, maybe a couple different stages. It depends on some of the businesses there and what they need for access for certain facilities in their building.
Okay. I think it might be worth looking at not doing the street at all, instead selling it to businesses there that are lacking parking, and put a cul-de-sac on Tucson Drive. Just an idea.
Sure.
I know the people on Tucson Drive get tired of all the cars speeding up and down, so cul-de-sac would slow it down. I'll pursue it through council a little bit.
I'd like to just add, on the 2019 plan, I had a question from a concern from a constituent, and within 18 hours, we got an answer, and they were quite satisfied knowing what their circumstance was. So just want to thank you and your staff for recognizing, as important as this is, it still affects people's daily lives, and keeping them informed is really important. So thanks for your work on that.
Welcome. It's difficult at the end of the year. It seems like we just get done with wrapping up construction, and now this week and next week, we're starting it off again, and we're going to have some road closures, and we try to accommodate for the residents the best we can. With that, I know this is kind of a bad time of year, but you know, a lot of you have driven around town, and you see some streets that may look in desperate need of repair, and it is the time of year where all streets are going to look their worst right now. You know, we have some frost problems and some moisture in the ground, so you know, within the next couple months, a lot of that'll come out, and we'll start to see the true surface on the pavement. So, with that, I'm going to pass it off to Matt for some of the future.
Thank you, Chase.
All right, we get to kind of look into the future here. I'm going to be going through kind of the end of our 5-year plan, kind of looking at the 2021 to 2023 outlook. Just kind of rolling off of what Chase was saying, you know, these, looking forward, these are kind of placeholder streets is kind of what we're anticipating at this time. And as weather or deterioration progresses, you know, roads could shift around. Some could move up, some could move back. So with that, we'll kind of start with our 2021 reconstruction streets, starting off the gate with Brandolin Boulevard, kind of front lanes there. With construction of Highway 58 and Viking, we're just kind of starting to see some deterioration there, and we kind of want to address that. So we'll be looking at, you know, a full depth concrete reconstruction. Also, we'll be starting West 18th Street. It's kind of going to be the first phase that we'll start getting into 18th Street. McLean Drive, as Chase was mentioning earlier, will also be completely reconstructed. We'll be looking at possible sidewalk infill with CDBG grants, trying to get that connectivity between University and Orchard. Also, we'll be doing West 22nd Street and West 2nd Street. For the full depth asphalt, we'll be looking at Madison Street and Clearview Drive. For the restoration of 2021, again, these are going to be overlaid streets. Depending upon how the street, how old it is, and what shape it's in, could have some gutter repair as well. Looking at LeClaire Street, Carlton Drive, Iowa Street, Longview Street, Dallas Drive, West 17th Street, and Olive Street. Looking into 2022 reconstruction, we've got 3 full-depth concrete streets that are listed. McLean Drive, we'll be continuing on with that, you know, extending the sidewalks, getting that connectivity between University and Orchard, potentially using those CDBG funding sources. Walnut Street, Walnut's going to be a continuation of the culvert project that we're doing this year. They'll be taking it up to 18th Street. And then I've got Main Street in there, just as a preliminary, you know, Main Street construction, the areas and phasing haven't been determined yet. This is just kind of a placeholder. So the 6th to 12th is just kind of a preliminary thought at this point. Looking at 2022 restoration, we'll be, again, this is overlaid and asphalt with possible gutter repairs. We got Wynwood Drive, Millennium Drive, Pheasant Drive, and then Caspin Place. One thing about Caspin Place is we've actually had some residents in that corridor that have reached out to us, expressed some concerns. So we'll be looking at doing some modifications to the roadway to help improve drainage in that area. Again, we also have State Street, Terrace Drive, and Elmwood Avenue. Looking into the last year of our reconstruction, The full depth, we got 3 full depth concrete streets. Again, continuing on with 18th Street, keeping that going. We also have College Street on there. And then also, again, Main Street, again, it's preliminary, but we just want to have it on there tentatively, placeholder of 12th to 18th at that time. And again, that could change depending upon phasing and construction and how all that all lays out. But we did want to show that in there. Asphalt, full depth reconstruction, looking at Summit Drive and River Ridge Road. And then for my last slide, 2023 restoration streets. Again, these are streets that are going to be overlaid with possible gutter repair. This is looking far out into the future, but we're thinking Pin Oak, Lincoln Street, Nordic Drive, West Viking Road, Hudson Road, West 11th, and Green Hill Road. So again, these are all kind of placeholders. We're looking into the future, as conditions change and, with the winter that we've had with some of the pavement distresses that we're seeing, some roads could be incorporated sooner than others. And this is just at this time, this is what we're thinking tentatively is what we have for placeholders. So with that.
Is there questions from council to either? Mr. Blanford?
Manager Chase, I'm just wondering if you guys have, or if you're aware of, or if you know if Newman Avenue is on the list at all. I know particularly at I think it's Gibson that it intersects with. The intersection is degraded pretty significantly. There's very large potholes in the intersection. I was just wondering if that one is on the list anywhere.
I recall seeing Newman. I'll have to check on it. Generally, we show about 4 to 5 years, but what we have on record is probably out to 8 or 9 years. So
Okay.
I do recall seeing Newman in there, but I can clarify that for you.
Great, thank you.
Got it.
I have
Sure.
With this being the time of year for the potholes, is there a pothole budget, and how are we doing in regards to what appears to be quite a few potholes? And some bigger than others and so on, so.
I'll Ryan on that with
I'll try to address that for you. With the moisture content we've had over the winter and the freeze-thaw cycles, it's been a terrible year for potholes. The extreme conditions have created a lot more potholes than we normally see. So when you talk about a budget for potholes, that comes out of our street construction funds from the operation and maintenance and operations programs, municipal operations and programs, department. So our street construction funds take care of that. We got a line item that is specific for streets, for street repairs, and that includes potholes. At this point, we're unable to get a permanent type of mix, so we're having to use a cold applied patch mix right now. That sometimes will stay put, sometimes depending on the conditions, it pops right back out. So we have to go over numerous times on different streets. Our intent with the weather starting to warm up a little bit is to get a more temporary type of a patch system going, which is our spray patcher. And that uses an emulsion and a rock mix, and it kind of creates the patch as it blends it into the pothole. So we should see some results there with some more permanent type of patching. Meanwhile, we're just continuing to go through until the asphalt plant opens up and we're able to get some permanent hot mix repair and be able to do it on a more permanent basis.
Thank you.
Didn't that start literally today, Brian? Are the crews out as of today to fix the potholes?
Our crews have been out for the past couple of weeks. Ever since we got a break from actually plowing the snow, we've been out patching holes, but starting today, we've really stepped it up, and we've got like 3 or 4 crews out now, and then tomorrow we'll get our spray patch unit out to create more permanent patching.
All right, thank you.
Ryan, you
Mayor,
mentioned
he also had some crews out just yesterday, over the weekend, to hit some of those severe potholes too, where we're getting a lot of reports. So they did have crews out over the weekend.
Excellent.
Ryan, you mentioned that this is one of the worst years for it. Do you have enough resources allocated to it? To Councilman Cruz's question, have we allocated sufficient funding for it to repair the damage?
Yeah, in our street construction budget, we do have adequate funding for whatever we need for materials. The manpower's there, the equipment's there. It's just a matter of being able to get out there and get drier conditions so that material stays put, and we're not having to come back and repatch the holes on a daily or every other day basis.
Thank you.
Anything further from council?
Just one more.
Please.
I know potholes are a problem. You go down south, you don't have it because you don't have the freezing cycles and the thawing and the water getting into it. But knowing what the problem is, isn't there, or is there any effort to find a permanent solution so we don't have to fill potholes? A more expensive mix or something that doesn't absorb water? Is anything going on to solve the problem rather than patch it?
Yeah, other than the material that they have today is a lot better quality than, say, 20 years ago where they blended rock and sand and a type of oil. Now it's more of, they call it a pro patch type of a mix. So the quality of the patch material is better now than it was back 20 years ago, like I said. Moving forward and trying to prevent potholes to begin with, I'm afraid the climate pretty much dictates that. And when you've got a moisture content 250% more than typical, or, you know, right now we're super saturated soils and subgrade, and there's a lot of movement going on with the freeze thaw, and that's what's creating our problem, coupled with the amount of times we've been out plowing snow. I mean, we were out almost on a daily basis for a while there, and the plows are pretty tough on the pavement as well. As you may have noticed driving around town, you see some of these manholes that are actually depressed 4 or 5 inches. That's a good indication of how much frost and how much movement we had, the moisture content swelling when it froze.
Thank you.
I guess to add on to Brian is that there's new mixed designs out there in the last few years that some of the northern states are experimenting with that hold up a lot better to the salt and the chemical additives that we put on the streets. So I think we'll be looking into that a lot more in the upcoming years, and if we can utilize those types of pavements to try to get additional lifespan out of them or prevent some of these early issues of cracking and potholes. And
A follow-up.
Sure.
Regarding in the fall, maybe a crack sealing program, or what is our program to maintain and blow out the cracks and so the moisture doesn't get in the fall to create the winter problem? What?
We have an extensive crack seal program that we operate throughout the summer months. Our program focuses on both the concrete and asphalt streets. We're getting to the point now where we're having to break up our streets in quadrants so we can take care of as many as possible throughout the year. But we use a rubberized asphalt material in a hot kettle that we blow the cracks out, dry them out real good, and then we apply the sealant to try to keep the moisture out. And Jace can expound on this a little bit, but also another method of restoration is the crack and salt and seal method of asphalt overlay, which has been effective as long as you've got a good sub-base or a good surface that you're placing it on.
Right, on Hudson Road when they resurface.
Correct.
Anything further? I believe, was there a couple motions that you would like to have council
yeah, I guess
consider? Do a slide for that?
briefly, we have a heavy focus tonight on the 2020 streets that I went into a little more detail with width and accommodations. None of those widths will be proposed to be changed for those specific reconstruction streets. So with that, we have a couple different motions. One would just be to approve the 5-year plan or the 4-year plan as we have it shown, and then to proceed with the final design of 2020.
Is there a motion there for number 1, council?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there a motion for the second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thanks again, gentlemen. Appreciate the update.
Guys?
Thanks, guys.
Final on the agenda, is there a motion to approve bills and payroll?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. This concludes this evening's Committee of the Whole meeting. We'll meet at the top of the hour for the regular City Council meeting. Thank you.